For everyone who is out in the anteroom, come on in. Those who are back in the dining room getting a beer or some wine, please join us. And for those of you who are coming in by way of GoToMeeting, welcome. What we've decided to do for the March forum is to talk about some of the opportunities and resources we have available for development grants. We have a group of speakers over the next 45 minutes or so, some based at the hub and some from across the partner network, and we're going to try to have some time for questions and answers at the end. Is that correct, David?
Correct.
So in order to make sure there's plenty of time for both the presentations and discussions, what I'd like to do is introduce David Redden. David, as you may know, is Chair of Biostatistics at the Hub in the School of Public Health. David leads us in the Biostatistics, Epidemiology, and Research Design section of the CCTS, affectionately called BIRD.
The
BIRD. And we have been working with David in review not only of projects that have come through panels, but also through pilot projects and so on. So with that, David, please, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much. So what we'd like to be able to do is simply go through, and I just want to begin with just a little bit of a background of the BIRD and what actually its mission is. And I've been doing this long enough that I know better than to read slides to people. So I'm not going to read it, but I'm going to emphasize that it's really, the idea is that, to me, the BIRD is the place where we bring together across UAB as well as the partner network a set of methodologists that would include biostatisticians, statistical geneticists, epidemiologists, all the different fields that you might need to quantify and to design statistically pretty much any type of grant under the sun that's coming. And we bring it together, and it's important that the network and the methodologists, and what we try to do, and the key phrase in that mission statement is by pairing the expertise. What we want to be able to do is for the study-specific needs and give you the state-of-the-art design, data management, and analysis. And those three things, it's important to recognize those three things cannot be disentangled. They have to come as a set, as a unit. But that's the purpose of the BIRD, is to bring together a vast expertise that can be used to help develop and guide the design of R01s, K awards. I will give you plenty of examples in just a few minutes. This slide is just really to give you the idea of the breadth and depth of what the BIRD is doing and what it can provide. The BIRD is, of course, spread out across the partner network. I'll start first with just discussing at UAB within the Department of Biostatistics. You've got myself, who I only jokingly refer to as the jack of all trades. Then we've got expertise in statistical genetics, including Chong-Shen Kui with regard to microarray, Min-Jung Liu with regard to designs of association studies and genetic studies. We've got in development of preventive medicine, we have Bob Oster with expertise in categorical data analysis and small size estimation, small sample size methods. We've got Department of Epidemiology with Jerry McGuinn and Emily Levitan, expertise in multiple designs. Throughout the network at Tulane, we have LaFont, and also at Pennington, we have Bill Johnson, both with expertise in general designs, sample size calculations, and as well as some bioinformatics. At University of Mississippi, Mike Griswold is there with expertise with regard to hierarchical linear models and mixed linear models. With South Alabama, Ben Long with regard to microarray analyses, and on the phone I have been told is Dr. Mellopar, who has expertise in sequential designs. So I mean, we can run the gamut of what needs to be designed, and we have expertise in a large number of things, a large number of designs. So the question is, why would you approach the BIRD with regard to a grant development? Well, for the past 23 years, I've been doing grant developments off and on for UAB. And there's always the key components that are going to go into a grant. And my favorite one that I often jokingly say, but it's only somewhat of a joke, I will be stopped on the street every day walking to a meeting, and someone will say, how many people do I need for this grant? And one of the key things people worry about for every type of grant is how do we justify the sample size? And one of the things I want to emphasize is the earlier that you can meet with a statistician to begin that discussion, the wiser, the better it is, mainly because a lot of times the power calculation is the hardest thing to pull off. And it takes the longest time for the statisticians and the methodologists to be educated. I cannot do that calculation in a vacuum. I have to have numerous discussions to help me understand the nature of the science that is being done and what is being measured. Now, with the proliferation of software and even the internet, you can find plenty of power calculations, power calculators online actually. And a lot of times I will start getting emails through Research Commons, through the CCTS that will say, David, would you mind verifying this calculation? And I have no problem with that. I have no problem with someone taking the first attempt. But I do encourage you that if you're trying to do it yourself, that you would have a methodologist look at it, because there will be, usually at study section, a statistician or a methodologist in the room trying to verify it. And the key thing is not just to get the calculation correct, is to provide all the information necessary to allow an independent person to replicate it. By the way, the one that I did try to verify this morning, I had to email at 5:45 a.m. and say, no, that calculation is not right. And they said, oh, thank you. So the other thing to keep in mind is the reason to start the collaboration early is every section for a grant that's going to come out of the bird is actually tailored specifically to it. There's no such thing as being able to boilerplate a statistical analysis section or a power calculation, mainly because they have to be tailored specifically to your specific aims. Otherwise, it will be very obvious that there's not sufficient depth in the analysis plan. The analysis plan should actually talk about your specific variables, your specific measurements. So they have to be tailored. One of the things that I find, having sat on study section for a number of years now, and is getting more and more attention, is that often data management plans are left out. In large clinical trials, they're never left out, but sometimes in R01s, they are left out. And even those should not be boilerplate, but there should be a detailed discussion of how the data is going to be collected, how is it going to be quality controlled, how are you going to make certain errors do not enter into that data set, and how will you proceed to manage, as I often say, the velocity of the data coming in, the magnitude and velocity, how much data you've got, how fast it has to be brought in, and how fast it has to be turned around. The other thing that I've been spending several weeks over the past, since January, for every application that has come across my desk through the CCTS, we have been writing sections for rigor and reproducibility. New emphasis in NIH, that we need to be able to demonstrate how, after the study is over, can an independent group take the data that you have and verify your results. So I've been writing letters of support in sections to indicate the approaches statistically that can be used to manage that, and providing letters of support saying how through the CCTS and through the BIRD that we will demonstrate reproducibility and establish archiving plans for the end of the study. The other thing that we can do through the BIRD is, as you are developing grants, if you need high quality graphics, we have expertise in that would allow you, if you need the graphs developed, because I mean this with all sincerity, usually, at least in my experience, graphs play an enormous role in getting a grant funded. The clearer the graphics, the more information you can convey, the better that grant is. How do you contact us? So I did the basic game in preparing this talk of why, how, when, and basic questions. So how can you meet with the bird? Well, my advice is to always begin the contact through the CCTS Research Commons on the web. On the slide right there, you've got the email and the phone. At the hub, we have walk-in clinics on Mondays from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. and on Wednesdays 11 a.m. to 1:30. There are also weekly office hours where methodologists are available now in PCAMs. Those occur on Tuesday mornings, Thursday mornings, and Friday mornings. And also throughout the network, there are times that are available by office hour as well as times by appointment. And if you need to contact us, of course, you come through Research Commons, then the process will be they will reach out to me and I will reach out in turn first to the request, and we get the expertise lined up and get the process going. The other thing to back up, and I left it off, I was thinking about it when I was looking through the slides earlier today. The other thing you might want to talk to methodologists about is if you've got randomization coming in your study, how you write the randomization section and the details that need to be there so that you can think about, do we need to do stratified randomization, all along the ideas also of convincing the panel that a statistician or a methodologist is involved by insisting on things like being able to permute the sample size and the block size. So those key things are, as I've said many times before, I think what I would like, when I try to collaborate, try to learn as much as I can with regard to all the science that's going on in the grant, but I also try to leave my fingerprints on it so the review committee can understand that a methodologist was working on it from the beginning. So the question, how soon should you contact us? As soon as the specific aims are drafted. I did not say finalized, that they are drafted. It's important to recognize everything boils down to specific aims. The analysis section is tailored to the specific aims. The power calculation is tailored to the specific aims. So it is the specific aims are the foundation of all the methodology sections. What should you expect when you meet with us? You should expect it to be not one and done. You should expect there to be an exchange. There will be a series of emails that go back and forth in this discussion. You'll be educating the methodologist with regard to what is being measured. The methodologist is going to have to understand these things and then take the time to tailor the science, the hypotheses, and the sections to your hypotheses and measurements. But please understand it should not be expected to be one and done. And the more time you allow for these collaborations, the better. At this point, I am going to pass it to Dr. Malakar to add her points also at the University of South Alabama, she is chair at the department down there and also a member of the Bird Network. Dr. Malakar?
Hi there. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes,
yes.
Hello? Oh, okay. Well, I'm just going to talk about for a couple of minutes, not too long, because you have already mentioned most of the important things. Now, in my experience, lots of times researchers don't contact statistician or biostatistician early enough in the project. In this slide, you can see that this is a general outline of how most of the research projects go. And I would like to recommend that contact biostatistician or statistician very early in your project. As soon as you have identified goals of what you want to do with this research project, talk to statisticians so that statistician can help you design experiment correctly. Oftentimes, I experience that people conduct experiments, collect data, and then come to me and they say, here is the data and analyze it for me. If you look at the next page, there are some drawbacks in this common practice. Sometimes we find that incorrect design is used to collect the data, And because of that incorrect design use, the collected data is not able to answer the questions that the researcher really wants to be answered. Sometimes because data is not collected properly, the results can be biased, and also there is a possibility of confounding factors, which you should take into account, early enough. So my suggestion to all of you is that contact statistician or biostatistician in the designing stage of the project. Get help from the statistician to design it correctly so that whatever data you collect will answer the questions that you want to be answered. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Jamison, are you there? Courtney? Did we lose Courtney?
No, we have lost Courtney. That's too bad.
Oh, it took me a second to unmute. I apologize.
No problem. I'm glad you're unmuted. Courtney is here just to give us a brief testimonial about what we have been able to do in collaboration with her with regard to a pilot study. So Courtney, I'm going to give you the floor.
All right, thank you. And thank you for letting me have this opportunity to come and basically gush about this program. Actually, I just came off of going through this whole process with BIRD where I was applying to a pilot program and contacted Dr. Redden very early in the process about my vision for a project. And I'm completely biased, but I had what I thought was a decent idea with kind of a long-term vision, and I had my specific aims. But what I quickly realized is that though my project was had a good kind of clinical background and I knew what I was asking clinically, I didn't have all the pieces together from what data to collect and exactly how to get my data to answer my questions kind of perspective. And so Dr. Redden immediately jumped in and learned as much as he could about what I wanted to know and what my setup was. And he really got into the meat of my project, into the heart of my project, and kept that in mind as we went through the process. And like you mentioned, it really was a scientific exchange. We went back and forth about pros and cons and looking at this and looking at that. He helped me to shape the scope of my project to make sure that it fit within the boundaries of the grant that I was applying for, to make sure that it really fit within the time frame, that it answered the questions that I needed, and more importantly, that it had the impact that I really wanted to have. And so by the end, I was much happier with the picture and the project as a whole, and I really have a good sense of where we're going with it. It wasn't just okay, we're going to do this project in a vacuum. It really helped me to design a long-term plan for what happens when we collect this data and we go left or right, and where can we go in the future with this, and what are we really setting ourselves up for. And so it was a really, really excellent process. I'm a new investigator. I'm a first-year faculty member with the Edward Via College of Osteopathic Medicine in Auburn, on Auburn's campus, and an affiliate assistant professor with Auburn University. And it really helps me, I would say long-term, understand what I need to do when I'm designing a project. And I know that in the future I will definitely come back to BIRD because it really helped me, like I said, to put together a great project, but also helped me to understand how to develop projects in the future. One other thing that I really loved is sometimes when you speak with biostatisticians, they speak their own language. And so even if they understand your project, what they tell you about that project or what you need to collect doesn't come back to me in the same language. And I felt like the entire time we were speaking the same language. So even when I got all the information back that actually went into the grant, I understood what we were doing, how we were doing it, and why we were doing it. So it wasn't just like, well, the biostatistician said that we need 15 people because of all of that math stuff. It was actually something that I understood, and I knew what we were doing, and we were able to even talk about how long we expected it would take our recruitment, or how long our recruitment process would be expected to take before we reach that point where we would have the population that we wanted. So it was just a really fantastic experience. They were really easy to work with. Like I said, I'm in Auburn, so we did a lot of email and phone conversations, and I really thought it was seamless. And in the end, I really am happy with the product that I came away with. And for my next set of grants, I fully intend to come back and ask their assistance.
And I want to emphasize one thing that Courtney, and I appreciate Courtney's comments, is that to understand that it's an ongoing process. It's not a consultation, it's a collaboration. We're not looking to do one grant and then that's it. We're actually looking to do what I would call careers, where we're seeing a sequence of grants, a sequence of opportunities of transitioning up a ladder of research. Stu, are you ready? Because we're about to transition the talk in the presentations over to panels.
Great.
So I'm going to let you have the floor, and
Thank you.
you know all your titles better than I do.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, everybody. I'm Stuart Frank. Thanks, everybody out in the network and here at the Hub. I have the pleasure of representing the Research Commons, the queen of the Research Commons, Dr. Jennifer Croker. We are all drones in her queendom. We just do what she says to do. Specifically, I'll be talking about the panels, the project panels. The faculty leads for this group would be myself and Kent Kaiser, ably assisted by Angie Schmeckfire, Jean Lambert, and Jennifer Croker, and others. And so let me start. By asking the question that many of us ask when we think about a research proposal, which is, how do I start? And I guess the first question to ask is, what am I interested in? And what kind of help do I need to achieve my interests? And in terms of funding our science or our intellectual endeavors, you might be looking at things like research grants or career development grants. You might be looking for small business grants. You might be trying to seek a drug device or discovery, drug or device discovery and development kind of grant. What help do we need for these kinds of things, and what help can we get from the CCTS, from Research Commons? We can get help from those who work for Commons in making our concept more incisive or creative, sharpening our study design, getting access to or learning about UAB's scientific resources or the resources of our partner network institutions. We can get review and perspective, in other words, asking the question, does it all hang together once we have a proposal, at least in a nascent stage. We can get advice as to grant assembly and management, which are later stages, and we can get advice as to graphics and schematic representation, some of which David ably touched upon in his discussion related to building other resources. So believe it or not, there is a cottage industry to study what constitutes good practices for writing a successful grant. And really, believe it or not, there's a guy named Professor Wisdom. I'll just repeat that, Professor Wisdom, who has written this article in Academic Medicine, which I was made aware of by Dr. Croker, but have perused myself, and really is a meta-analysis of papers published in this area with sort of best practices that are not too surprising in their recommendations, but I'll go through them anyway. You should research and identify appropriate funding opportunities. Good start. You should use key proposal components to persuade reviewers of project significance and feasibility. Of course, the proposal components are those elements like the specific aims, the research design, the preliminary data, etc. You should describe the proposed activity and their significance persuasively, clearly, and concisely. That takes some time, and I think most important, which is not here, is take time to do this. I'm here to tell you. You need to select a novel, high-impact project, or at least, hopefully, select it. You need to conduct an exhaustive literature review. You need to be the expert in the area and demonstrate that expertise. You need to get review and feedback from colleagues. Establish a study design that's simple, logical, feasible, and appropriate for the research questions. Develop a timeline for the proposed process. Ensure that the budget is reasonable, not always easy. And consider interdisciplinary collaborations. I think we all know this, but this is a nice codification of how we think about writing an excellent proposal. And probably worth a look-see at this article, which is available online, even if you're not at a university. I just checked it on my iPad before I spoke. Well, what about the panels program? We have three general goals. To promote constructive peer review of either projects, papers, or grants, therefore sharpening the scientific content and enhancing study design and improving success in external assessment for all faculty. We want to facilitate new interdisciplinary relationships to leverage scientific expertise, encourage creativity and promote innovation. We want to enhance productive collisions. I guess we want to reduce entropy. Yes? Yeah. Enhance collisions, reduce entropy. I remember my PChem. Okay, and we want to support junior faculty through mentored career development awards and investigator-initiated research programs. So we basically want to take, we want to provide a place where collisions can occur. That's number 2. We want to enhance and sharpen the scientific content. That's number 1. And we want to support junior faculty in their career development, all of which can be accomplished by the panels. Just to show you that we named the CCTS correctly, they are collaborative, collegial, targeted discussions driven by scientific needs. I like that slide. I didn't make it first, but that's okay. We have three flavors of panels, really 2 and 1 with a sub-flavor. One of the panels is the Nascent Projects panel. This is a large multidisciplinary group. It's our oldest sort of panel. It's our panel that meets the least frequently by design. This is a standing membership with some added benchers, if need be, who provide a wide range of expertise and can be best used to analyze and assist investigators with nascent projects that are just in their development stages, sometimes further developed to the written stage, but usually in the nascent project stage. Meets monthly, roughly, or it can be arranged on a little bit of a different time frame, but it is not quite by definition as nimble as the panels done quickly, which we assemble, not surprisingly, quickly. A variety of the panels done quickly is the TIES panels, which are Translational Investigator Exchange Service, which is a sub-variety of the panels done quickly. The PDQs, or pretty damn quick, panels done quickly, are rapidly deployable. They're nimble. They come together and then fall apart, or stay together, but they don't have to stay together. This is not necessarily an ongoing panel. It can be, but they're designed to be again, put together rapidly, and they're done. They're put together rapidly by Jennifer and her associates in a really compelling fashion. We have a good Rolodex, and we twist a lot of arms, and we have the boss to help us twist the arms. We don't usually have to twist arms, actually. We usually get panelists pretty easily. The panels have been here at the hub primarily, but they have really extended to the network as well, both in terms of the people seeking panel help as well as the panelists. We've been reasonably broad in our efforts. This is a breakdown in this diagram of the users for these panels and where they've come from. Not surprising, the majority have come from the School of Medicine here at the hub. But you can see that we're very broad. We've had people come from the undergraduate environment here at UAB, from nursing, dentistry, engineering, optometry, from our partners, from the health professions school here at UAB, the College of Arts and Sciences, which is the undergraduate college, and the School of Public Health. So we really touched faculty members from all over our campus and our partner network, both in terms of people seeking help in terms of getting panels as well as panelists. We've been busy, and we've been increasingly busy. The net effect of this slide is pretty obvious. It's just broken down by the kind of panel, and you can see that over the last several years, the pace has increased with ferocity. I think that's actually upward sloping. I'm going to kind of draw it again. There we go. Okay, good. And here's some numbers in recent years of panels that have been done in that calendar year, and the number of external awards that have arisen from those panels in the subsequent years to the date. So 78 panels in 2012, to date 39 external awards have arisen from that, and et cetera. And of course, we don't know the latest count. But you can see that it's been pretty successful, so the message here is if you want to get a grant, do a panel. Well, wait a minute, I'm not sure that exactly what it is, but I think it certainly is probably a pretty good strategy. Where do you go to get help? As Kimberly always tells us, Research Commons. Whenever I ask a question, the only thing he says is Research Commons. It's a good idea, and our website, which is undergoing some revision, but still will have a easily accessible tab for Research Commons, and when you go there, you can find all of these different tabs to help you with questions pertaining to research. One of them, of course, is the panels tab, which will take you directly to Jennifer or associates and try to figure out which panel you want and how to set it up and when it will be set up and what the time frame is, etc. It's really worked quite well with a lot of hard work. Jennifer may use some assistance from others on campus, and in particular, she may use this assistance for guiding those that want help with large P grants or multidisciplinary or multi-investigator grants. She may get help from our Council of Center Director, Council of Center Administrators, COCA, SWAT team. They wear funny clothes, they enter rooms really fast. I mean, it's really, they're basically a large group of scientific administrators who are expert at knowing where the resources are and where the help is for these large grants and helping people put them together, and it's really remarkable. Jennifer can help either guide you to them or herself seek help from them to get help with your project. And then finally about Research Commons, we have developed, well, I haven't developed it at all, others have developed, other competent people have developed, a library of grants for your edification. And this is a great idea. These are grants that have been successful, that is, they've achieved funding in all these different categories, from Ks to Ps to Rs, etc., and Ts. And they are a good resource for you to look at to get a feel for how to write one of these things. Now, you can't obviously sort of copy and paste. It's not going to help you do that. You have to put your own science in. But it's really helpful, especially when you're junior. I know it helped me when I was junior and still does, to get a look at a successful grant and what elements are there. And this doesn't get you off the hook for looking at the program announcement, obviously, for things that may have happened that are different, but it certainly is helpful. And as somebody who's put in 2 grants this week, it is all the help you can get. Yes, sir.
What link is that associated with on the website?
Good question. I knew you were going to ask that question. Where is that link? Do you know?
It is under the research training, and it's on the very first page on the training.
There you go. Worth a shot. Give it a shot. It's a pretty easy website to navigate. I just didn't know which tab is the right one. Did you want me to talk about vouchers, or are we going to? Let me just mention briefly something about vouchers. In the current cycle of our CTSA award and others that have gone in at this time too, one of the things that we were allowed to budget in a fairly robust way were what's called vouchers. And simply put, we talked about this before in a previous forum, simply put, these are mechanisms that allow rather small but substantial amounts of money, up to $5,000, to be allocated after review by the executive committee for whether it fits the themes or not, to investigators for unanticipated expenses that will allow them to use CCTS resources either here or at the partner network institutions in order to garner preliminary data that will make a proposal more competitive. In some measures to supplement pilot proposals where data has led into a direction that wasn't funded, although we don't want this to just be an extension of pilot awards, and for similar sorts of endeavors. And we really want people to use this mechanism to access services that the CCTS provides. And it's not like we write a check and you go home and you might use it to buy a Lexus or part of a Lexus or a door maybe or something like that. Rather, it's an account that is set up so that you can draw on existing resources either in the BIRD or the CRISP or the Clinical Research Unit or other CCTS resources up to a $5,000 expenditure. It's a great resource. We have, this is a new thing that NCATS has allowed us to do with our grant, and we've already approved, what, about 10 or 12? Something like that. We're trying to turn this around pretty quickly. The process is rather painless. The application is on the Research Commons website, and it's fairly self-explanatory. You don't have to write a whole grant for this. In fact, please don't write a whole grant for this, because I'm one of the guys that has to evaluate them. We want a fairly clear and concise description of what you want to do, how it fits the CCTS mission, or the CTSA mission, and how this will lead to advancement in your next stage of proposal writing, etc. And then there is this element of enhancing reproducibility through rigor and transparency. This has been the topic of 2 forums, and I'm only going to be very brief. This is just a slide that you can refer to if you want to try to get up to speed on what NIH wants us to do in grant proposals, including mine going in this week, which is to enhance rigor and transparency And there are some guidelines as to what applicants need to put into their grants to validate that the scientific premise of the proposed research is evident, that there's authentication of key biological and or chemical resources, that there's consideration of relevant biological variables like sex and age and things like that in both animal and human models, and that there's rigorous experimental design for robust and unbiased results. I can tell you as a practical matter, just having again submitted one this week, the element that needs to be a separate element now is a PDF that addresses authentication step 2. And there needs to be verbiage that indicates how antibodies are going to be validated, cell lines, animal models, etc. The rest of the elements in here, there's a lot on our website from previous discussions that Jennifer and David Redden had led, and you can find out more details there. But you should try to incorporate those into your proposal to make sure that those elements are read. These will apparently be review criteria. I say apparently, they will be review criteria. How much they're going to be incorporated into the first round of reviews is hard to know, but we need to be ahead of the curve on this.
Stu,
Yes.
about this, and I think maybe Jennifer, I don't know if she followed up with that or not, but at the last Council of Center Directors, David Allison presented about this topic, and said like he developed like a page of like I think that the questions like if we answer while we writing our proposal, it addresses this. And I think, Jennifer, you were going to get with David to merge these things together and have it for on the CCTS website.
Almost like a boilerplate,
Yeah,
or at
like
least
a
a checklist.
boilerplate, no,
A checklist is probably a better way
So,
to put it.
I think this would be really great for all of us to have and have it for this.
I can tell you that the authentication of resources, I mean, I wrote a sort of a wet bench kind of proposal this week that I'm submitting. And I actually got together with one of my most junior faculty who's also writing an R01, and we both came up with language that serves us both, and we'll kind of keep it as a template. If it looks good and it's reviewed well, obviously I'll provide it. But, you know, these kinds of things are going to emerge so that we get our act together in a reasonable way, especially for the required elements. Obviously, tailoring it to your own research and making sure that it's what you're doing.
Well, just if I may address Dr. Fluid's point directly, David Allison, David Redden, Dr. Thank you, Renee Desmond, and myself, we met last week and have a plan to develop this resource, and hopefully we'll have it up and running very soon.
That would be very helpful. This has caused a lot of jitteriness in people. Every time NIH does something different, it creates not unreasonable anxiety, so that would be one thing. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Sonia Heath. Sonia is in the Infectious Disease Division, Associate Professor here at UAB. Sonia?
Thank you. So I've been asked to comment on my experience with the panels done quickly, and I have benefited from having panels created for me, and have also served on one panel that met a couple of times for an investigator. The first panel that I had was actually for a new project. It wasn't a nascent panel, but it was a panels done quickly. And in a matter of just a couple of weeks after I submitted a pre-proposal for a pilot award, a panel of, I don't know, 6 to 8 people were pulled together. I had recommended some investigators in immunology, and beyond that didn't really make a lot of recommendations. And I was really impressed with the breadth of collaborators that were brought together for the panel. I had a surgeon who was, or somebody in the surgery department who was a PhD who I'd never met, who's probably been on this campus for over 20 years, who came and made very thoughtful comments about my grant, something that really wasn't an area of expertise of his, but he was a clinical investigator who had some very good insight. Statisticians were present. In my case, immunologists were present, but I think that the comment about these productive collisions is really a key component of this. All of us have our collaborators that we've either trained with or within our divisions or our various departments that we work with. But this is a huge university, and there's a lot of resources here that, with everybody being busy and putting 12 grants a year in, trying to be funded and be supportive of collaborators that that were helping on their grants, you oftentimes don't have the opportunity to meet all of these people. So I think this is a huge resource to have the members of the CCTS bring together these people that you otherwise would not meet. And I think that, you know, they all take it very seriously to review your grant, oftentimes at the end of a session, handing you printed copies with handwritten comments that, you know, you can take away after a 1-hour meeting of additional comments. So I really have found that very invaluable, and each of the people gave unique feedback. I think the other thing that's very organic about this, as opposed to maybe sending your grant out by email to 3 or 4 people and getting individual people's comments, when you bring together a group of people into a room, you get an organic conversation that is generated, and people feed off of each other and really develop their ideas in a way that you probably wouldn't get from just receiving email comments. So I think that's another component of the panels that is really effective. In my case, I actually had a panel that then merged into a panel that moved into a funded project, and a portion of the people continued on that panel, and then other members that I had suggested came into that panel, including having one person, David from the Bird, maintained on that panel. So I do think that there is this component of a panel being generated very quickly and dissolving very quickly, but also evolving into something that will continue and allow you to get continual feedback as you generate your data and try to pull together your science. I've also had the opportunity to serve on a panel, which was hopefully useful to the person that I was serving, but I found very invaluable to myself as well. I was brought in as a content expert on an area, but to me it almost felt like a mini study that people were able to come together and give direct feedback to the investigator who had submitted an R01, had gotten summary statements back, and then wanted to resubmit. But we were able to review the summary sheets, and in some cases, particularly as a junior investigator, you see these comments made, but there's a lot of reading between the lines. And I really think that that was some of the most useful comments that we made, that, you know, even their summary sheets with their mentors and their advisors, there were additional components that we brought to light that, that they had not appreciated from the feedback that they had gotten from their somewhat insular group of people who critique their science. So the concept of being able to expand out in a network of your university or even larger that the CCTS can bring together is really a key component of these panels. And then, like I mentioned, I felt like in some ways it was sort of like a small study section. You can imagine, like David was mentioning earlier, they should be able to reproduce your statistical analysis. And on the panel that I served on, there was a statistician in the room who just started giving all of these details about the statistics, which was way over my head, but I learned a lot from it, and again created that that environment where everybody was sort of feeding off the discussion and on the discussion. And again, at the end of that panel, everybody had sort of printed out the grant, handwritten comments. It was a 1-hour session. It wasn't onerous to be present, you know, for a long, drawn-out meeting, but everybody handed the investigator handwritten copies of additional recommendations, you know, maybe smaller edits and suggestions for that person to continue to improve their grant.
There's usually lunch.
And there's usually lunch too. I don't know why I didn't mention that. So again, I think one of the other things that kind of came up in this panel was there was a comment about institutional support. That this was one of those things where there was sort of in between the lines a comment made that they had received a score that really was not something that they could personally fix, but had to be fixed at the level of the letters of support that they were provided. And I think this junior investigator really would not have had any way to recognize that, and certainly hadn't recognized it coming into this meeting after meeting with their mentors and their other scientific collaborators. So again, I think as much of this that we can demonstrate and improve here at the institutional level before your grants go on to NIH or whatever funding agency is really, really valuable. So I've really benefited from having panels made for me that have continued on in a project that I have ongoing and serving on panels, and I think that all of the members that have been on panels that I've participated in have been very active, scientific collaborators that hope to continue to nurture the scientists that are participating in these panels. So I'll end with that.
So I think we have the opportunity now for questions, and those questions can come in either from those in the audience or those who are coming in by way of the GoToMeeting. Thoughts, comments, questions? Steve?
Is the big one that's still associated with the CCTS?
So the Big One program, I'm not sure that's continuing in exactly the same format. For those of you who don't know, this was a program that was a collaboration between the School of Public Health and the School of Medicine, where there was the commitment for those who wanted to put together a proposal to dedicate an entire week with no other interruptions, sequestered over in Lister Hill, with access to typically a retired NIH program officer for some feedback, also some support perhaps in budget development and in graphics. I think the lesson from the Big One program was really pretty straightforward, and once you think of it, you go, yeah, of course. But it's the real life issue that all of us face a lot of pressures on our time. If you set aside the time and prioritize writing the grant, and you don't allow any interruptions, it's remarkable what we can create. Now, whether we need a big one to then continue to allocate that time, I think is part of the discussion that's going on. David, who is now out in the atrium, David Brennan, who has just stepped in, we working with the CCTS have captured the capacity for the graphics artist who is working in the Big One, so that person is available. How you solve the time issues between you and your chair, your dean, your heart, however you work that out. If we can figure out that having something called the Big One helps in that regard, we're happy to do it. Other thoughts or comments, questions? And questions can be from those who are here in the hub. They could also be questions that come in from abroad, if you wish, across the network. Jennifer, perhaps I could put to you one question that I think is actually quite important, and that's the operational piece for putting together PDQs. Mm-hmm. I think one of our experiences has been that as we have developed a mechanism for having smaller, more nimble groups to provide feedback, that has actually served a larger percentage of our investigators than some of the other mechanisms. How much advanced time, realistically, is important to have for us to put together a panel?
So realistically, I would probably recommend, or with any investigator that I'm working with, given a deadline, let's say of March 5th, just since we're crossing it, I would argue that the panel done quickly would really need to be done in early February in order to provide the level of feedback. As an investigator, you'll have the opportunity to digest that, to really embrace some of the recommendations and make sure that it is implemented throughout all aspects of your grant, whether it's the research strategy, the budget, the justification, the bio sketches, the letters of support, which Sonia raised a few minutes ago. And so in order to get that on the books, as it were, I think that we've been pretty successful in turning these around in about a week. That's probably the best average. So if you can contact us late January in this metaphor, in this hypothetical, late January, we can work with you and get something on the books for the first week or so of February. That is, I think, the ideal landing for a grant for the use of PDQs.
So can I ask a question, Stu, please?
Well, I was just going to add to that. There's two issues, right? I mean, one is we don't want to be abusive of the organizers by putting too much time pressure on them because although they're really good, they may not be able to get the group together. The second is you need time to synthesize what the results of the panel were. I mean, I'm sure Sonia can attest to this. As a division chief, when I meet with my junior faculty who are writing grants, we try to flesh out what they're going to do a few months in advance, of course. And I usually tell them to try to go at least 6 weeks or thereabouts before, and therefore plan. I can go a little further before, if it's at all possible. Yeah. That's not always possible. Sometimes you want quicker advice on a paper review or critiques or that sort of thing. But I really think for both of those purposes, the earlier the better, even though it's a panel's done quicker.
So can I then put a question to each of you who are here? Who amongst us has actually written and submitted a grant? How many of you have tried to make substantive changes in the last 3 days before you submit?
Substantive changes?
Some of you haven't? I don't believe that.
I tried, but I don't think they're actually substantive.
Well, so that's
You can put that word in there.
No, I
that's
take
the
the
moment
point.
of where stress and output.
It should be polishing at that point.
Right.
I try, but I don't think
So
it's effective.
the point I'm making, and you notice I raised my hand because I'm equally culpable here. But I think one of the major lessons, actually from the big ones, but also if we're really honest with ourselves, if we're not pushing all of this work earlier relative to the deadline, and we're all leaving it to the last couple of days before OSP requires our material, we're hurting ourselves badly. And so the panels can help because I think peer feedback can be quite useful, if only to help you examine, re-examine how you're approaching the question at hand. But it's up to each of us individually to realize that the sooner we can get working on these grants, the better off. Maybe I'll ask one other question. If you're planning a grant, sometimes people start working at a whiteboard where they're starting to think about the ideas. When do you usually start doing that relative to the deadline? Anyone do 6 months? Stu is hedging, he's trying to be good. How about 4 months?
Yeah.
So I would bet you, I'm not quite sure how we would capture these data, but the people who are most successful are actually starting at least 6 months in advance. Because that's where you can get a sense of refining your ideas, understanding the information you need to support those ideas. You have the chance to craft that into a cohesive and compelling narrative. And then it's really at that point that you can get colleagues to come in and say, the story is hanging together, the data look compelling, but if we leave it to the last week, it's unlikely that it's going to happen.
So that's where MPPs can really serve insofar as providing that context of brainstorming and seeing if the spaghetti sticks to the wall and then gives you the kind of feedback at the initial outset. That's not grant or text refinement. It really is idea refinement.
I think someone might have anticipated where this.
Oh, sorry.
No, don't be sorry at all. Sonia, and then
I
Steve.
just wanted to follow up that in the panel that I served on, that was already a resubmission of a grant. The panel met and the investigator wanted to make revisions and the panel offered to meet a second time because some of the revisions were significant. And I think while every panel maybe doesn't do that a second time or a third time, even if it is just interacting with 1 or 2 people on the panel, to be able to get that second round of feedback before the second submission, you really do have to be, several weeks in advance.
Sure.
6+ weeks in advance.
Steve, comments?
Does the partner network have any relevance to those sort of faculty that you would be?
Absolutely. One thing that we have done is we have pulled together across the network panels that involve not only projects coming in from partners, but also panelists that are based at partner institutions. I think it's very important to realize that there is the opportunity for synergy there, for complementation of our scientific expertise that can only strengthen what we do. One of the reasons for having this particular forum tonight is to promote this idea. It's obviously a little bit easier practically to have a panel if everyone can get together in the same room. But we can get close by using digital technology. And the times that we have used it, we've had sometimes folks come in electronically. Sometimes we've had people drive a fair distance to come and have a panel here at the hub. Our idea is to do whatever works for the people who are involved. There's a phrase which probably has been used a little bit too much, but I'll use it tonight anyway. It takes a village. And if we want to be successful, we need to realize we have a lot of valuable input that can come from our colleagues, not only within any single given institution, but really across a group of institutions where collectively we can put together a level of expertise that is really quite special.
It's really fun being a panelist, by the way. I'll just tell you, as Sonia mentioned, it's a learning experience. And I've participated in some where we've had partner network panelists as well, and that's really interesting cross-pollination. I think it's really helpful.
Good. So other questions, either from the room or from across the go-to meeting? Because my watch says, if I'm reading it correctly, that we're right about on time. The only other comment I would make is, guys, there's still some food back there in the dining room. I think there's some beer. I don't know. I tried to do my part. And there's some wine. But if there are no other questions, thanks very much for coming together. Sonia, Stu, David, who much prefers standing outside the room rather than inside the room. Everyone who has contributed, thanks very much. Remember, any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. We're very passionate about pulling our expertise together so we can all do a better job. Thanks, guys.